Hello lovely people, so today we're going to go over the femme fatale. So what is the femme fatale? The femme fatale is essentially a media archetype. You will find it in things like books and film and any sort of media, and it's just a sort of archetypal character, and literally it means deadly woman, and it is also under other names such as the vamp or the man-eater. So if I read the dictionary definition from the internet, it actually will define it as an alluring and seductive woman, especially one who leads men into compromising and dangerous positions. An attractive and seductive, but ultimately dangerous woman. A woman who is considered to be dangerously seductive. So the femme fatale is essentially someone who is very attractive and enticing, and she's going to lead usually men to their doom. She might use literal magic in some cases, or she might use trickery. She might pretend to be helpless or something like that to, well, trick the victim. As this is a literary technique that has been used since forever, we actually have quite a few examples of femme fatale. So off the top of my head, I can think of Lilith, who is a sort of figure from a lot of Jewish, and I think maybe even pre-Jewish and like Sumerian sort of mythology. And essentially she wanted to be seen on equal ground with Adam, as in like Garden of Eden Adam. She was seen as his first wife, and essentially she wanted to be seen as his equal instead of below him, and that didn't really fly back then. And depending on some versions, she's banished from the Garden of Eden or she willingly leaves, and she just has a great time with a bunch of demons outside the garden, and she herself is often seen as some sort of demon. So it's not going to be a surprise to anyone that she's sort of almost seen as a feminist icon in some cases in the modern day. We also have things like the sirens, who are a very common sort of mythological creature, and this could be of the bird variety and the fish variety, because essentially they both lead usually men to their doom who are sailing on ships through their voice. For a book example, you could look at things like the sisters in Bram Stoker's Dracula, who, when Jonathan Harker leaves his room and falls asleep in a different room, the sisters come out from the shadows and they almost drain him of all his blood and kill him if Dracula himself didn't come and actually save him from that situation. And another example would be Theda Bara, who was an actress from the early sort of silent film sort of era, and she kind of lent into this Orientalism type thing, and she would play these sort of mysterious characters and things such as Cleopatra, and she was known as the vamp and had this very distinctive sort of style. And she sort of crafted this sort of myth of being this mysterious like Arabian actress that was really popular. So I'm going to skip to the 1940s, and I think this is an interesting time for the femme fatale, as this is when a lot of men were off fighting in the war, and it was mainly women who were left behind, and they were taking up these traditionally once seen as male roles, and when they weren't working, they wanted to be entertained, and one form of entertainment is indeed the cinema. And the film industry probably looked at this and went, we need to start making more films that cater to women because they're our primary audience. So that's when we see this sort of golden era almost of quite a few femme fatale films. And I believe this sort of archetype probably appealed to women at the time because they wanted to feel strong and capable, because they were suddenly thrust into this situation where they had all this responsibility and they really were putting in all this sort of effort to win the war. And they suddenly had all this weight on their shoulder and perhaps all these pressures, and they just wanted to feel strong. So we have things like Rita Hayworth in Gilda, we have things like Ava Gardner in The Killers. One thing off the top of my head I remember is I Married a Witch, which Veronica Lake was in, and there's so many more, there's so much. And again, you see, it's a very attractive woman in some sense, and she's doing her thing and leading men to doom. I also think this is an interesting juxtaposition for after the war. So when the war is over and the men are coming back, we get more of the sort of James Bond sort of femme fatale. And I find this interesting because this is very much a femme fatale through a male gaze, whereas I believe the 1940s femme fatale was usually through a more female gaze. I'm sure the film industry was very male dominated, so it's probably not super sort of female gaze, but you sort of get the point. It was probably less male gaze. And the thing is, all the men had come back from the war. It was the 60s and so on, because this franchise is a very long franchise. But also, James Bond is a male fantasy. It's the fantasy of being this really cool spy and having all these attractive women around you and being capable. It would make sense for it to be from a male gaze perspective because that's the primary audience. But it has created this really sort of interesting juxtaposition, I think, of this strong, capable woman, but through a male gaze. A lot of the time, she ends up dead in the films, or she has to be bested by James Bond in quite a lot of them. So I think they still would count as femme fatales, although a lot of them are very dangerous and also very beautiful and captivating. But the juxtaposition, I think, is quite interesting. And I'd like to give some special mentions to Catwoman in all of her iterations. And things like certain villains like Maleficent, and certain just real people like Claudia Winkleman, specifically when she is the presenter for the show The Traitors, that is all about people getting murdered. Not literally, but it's a very spooky sort of gothic sort of show, and she's always had a sort of dark aesthetic, but specifically in that show and how she presents and is very sort of intimidating, I suppose is the best word. I think it really shows how well she can be this sort of femme fatale character. And also I would like to give a special mention to Pamela Anderson when she is in Barbed Wire. And I know this is also a very sort of male gaze sort of film, especially at the beginning when there's a gratuitous scene of just Pamela Anderson just showing off how beautiful she is. But it's very camp, and I just love it because it is very camp. You know, it's just how it is. So why is the femme fatale a beloved sort of archetype? I think it's because the femme fatale usually speaks to some sort of want within society at the time. So if I look at Theda Bara as an example again, she was someone who had a lot of autonomy about her. She went and she got what she wanted, even if it was things like stealing other people's men. She wore this vamp makeup, this really visible makeup that was very obvious. And you have to bear in mind, this was at a time when wearing makeup that was visible wasn't considered socially acceptable. It wasn't really until the 20s where visible makeup was something that was socially acceptable. Also, things like women being able to drive was slowly becoming more sort of socially acceptable as the 20s went on. In the 20s, we had certain demographics of women gaining the right to vote. We had things like smoking in public becoming socially acceptable for women, which in hindsight, smoking is awful for you, but through a context of the 1920s, women were gaining more freedoms and feminism was progressing. And I think Theda Bara playing that character essentially of this confident, independent woman, this very modern, for the time, progressive woman, really spoke to the women of the time. And I believe the femme fatale can essentially update herself if she wanted to and appeal to each era that she's in. You know, if you look to the 40s again, it appeals to women who benefited from the progressive nature we had from the 20s, but now we're taking on even more jobs than they had previously and were in even more sort of traditionally male roles, and the femme fatale can appeal to that. In a modern context, I'm not actually really sure. I would say in a modern context, the femme fatale can really appeal to modern ideas of sort of sexuality and maybe almost queerness, because, well, for one, I believe the femme fatale can be anyone. You can be any gender and be a femme fatale for once. And also, I think you can be alluring and captivating without the sort of traditional ideas of it. You can show off your skin if you want to, there's nothing wrong with that, but you also don't have to. I believe there's so many different ways that you can pull off this aesthetic, and I think just getting into that and this idea of I dress how I want for me, and if other people find that captivating and alluring, that's nice, but it's ultimately for me. If you take anything away from this video, I want you to be trying out this aesthetic for yourself. Please don't do the whole femme fatale thing to try and attract a mate. It's not going to land well because you're going to be your inauthentic self, and we're going to find out down the line sooner or later. Please do this because you want to do it, even if you find out you don't like this style and you move on to something else, or you don't wear it 100% of the time, whatever it is. Please just do this because you're doing it for yourself.
Can I ask you all, my ladies, you are all such strong, beautiful, vicious, vibrant women. Yes. How did you all end up married to such boiled potatoes?
So now it's on to the styling section. The phrase I use is captivating yet intimidating. So, the typical idea is to dress in a provocative way. This doesn't have to be the typical bountiful cleavage and legs for days and long flowy hair. Everyone has different bodies and philosophies and comfort levels and sensory needs, and this isn't a one-size-fits-all. You can create mystery by partially showing an area of the body you like about yourself. Besides the typical legs and chest, you might have strong shoulders or arms you show off in a strapless gown or sheer sleeves. Being visibly strong works great for the Bond girl kind of archetype, or just to show off how strong you are. Make the lesbians love you and the men fear you. Just girly things. You can also be provocative while completely covered. You can wear fitted garments to show off your figure, be it hourglass or more straight, or things like skinny or slim-fit jeans can show off your legs. Accessories associated with a vague 20th century glamour can also add intrigue, as it's less common and more glamorous than our casual modern style nowadays. Things such as long gloves, pearls, and fancy hats. Accessories can also add authority and intimidation beyond the visual. For example, heels that make you taller and create noise as you strike the floor, bangles that make noise as you move, spikes on clothes that are sharp to the touch. It's fun to think beyond the visual. Also, 20th century inspired makeup like the 1920s vamp, or even a simple red lip can evoke mystery. With clothing, the colour can help create the look. Dark colours tend to be more mysterious. Black is the typical colour. It's associated with intelligence and authority. Think a judge. Black can also mean intrigue and enchantment. Think a stereotypical witch, and also protection. Both within witchcraft and also the fact black can make you an obscure shadow and hide parts of the body you want to hide. Red is the colour of danger, think road signs, and also is associated with primal urges. For example, a lot of food restaurant signs are red, as red can help make you feel hungry. Also passion and romance, think red roses and stylized hearts. Blue is a bit left of field as it's associated with the Virgin Mary and this idea of being pious or something medical. However, it's associated with poison. Food in nature is rarely blue. Designers like Mugler also have blue as a signature, and if I've ever seen a femme fatale fashion house, it's Mugler. Also, animal print is a macro trend from the 20th century that can add drama alongside interesting colour schemes in nature. Specifically, the colour schemes animals use to imitate poisonous creatures to prevent being eaten. It can evoke a dangerous vibe to ward off people for you too, perhaps. You don't need to meet any ideals of conventional attractiveness to be beautiful, or a femme fatale, or glamorous, mysterious, whatever. I'll use me as an example. I have a soft, angular kind of face. In this photo I have a black and white filter, but no makeup. My natural face has an exotic look to it. I know I shouldn't really call myself exotic, but I have that oriental otherness about me because of my heritage, which can cause intrigue. There's eyes and strong eyebrows which kind of stare into your soul. Also my slight definition in my cheekbone. Highlighting this emphasizes how strong and intimidating I can look. I also like how sheer tops look on me. I often feel more comfortable and provocative when my chest is covered, even if it's compressed a little. Feeling like I can break into dance or a fight is something I personally like. Also, a giant byeeeeee hat is something I personally like. If you are into the image ID or essence system, I like to dress in natural and dramatic essences, which are angular shapes in intense colours, especially rounded circular stuff. It complements the intense look I can give off. You are beautiful, and there's something captivating and intimidating you can bring out within yourself. The advice I think that will help everyone is a confident demeanour. I'm not always dripping in confidence, but simple things like good posture and a head held high can make a difference. Femme fatales are always confident, unless they're up to trickery and they're acting helpless. I also have my what I call model walk, where I walk as if I'm surfing on the runway. I keep a kind of tunnel vision. I can sometimes see people look at me in my peripheral vision,
Probably because my heels make noise as I fill the area with my presence and authority. I don't look at them. I keep up my confident stride and pace. Hopefully this will give you some insight into the femme fatale and help you create the look for a way that works for you. And with that, go have fun with fashion. Okay, bye! Blue is a bit left. Noodles, if you're going to stay in the room, you have to be quiet. Okay, Noodles, just be quiet if you want to stay in the room.